Russian President Vladimir Putin is taking aim at the West over the war in Ukraine. And in a speech yesterday, Putin accused the West of playing a, quote, dangerous, bloody, and dirty game.
Yeah, Putin also framed the war as a Russian battle against Western dominance, but downplayed fears that his country would use nuclear weapons on the battlefield.
We've never said anything proactively about possible use of nuclear weapons by Russia. We have only hinted in response to those statements that the Western leaders have made. It doesn't make sense for us to do it, neither politically nor military. The only country in the world that has used nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear state is the United States. They did it twice against Japan.
NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Kyiv with more on this. Hey, Matt, good to see you. So a lot to unpack yesterday from President Putin's speech we just played a little bit of there. What were some of the biggest takeaways from that, and what's been the response from President Biden to those comments that we just heard right there about nuclear weapons?
Yeah, really quite a lot to take away from that speech. And, the most stunning part was what you just played. Vladimir Putin, after weeks, months of saying that he was going to possibly use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, all of a sudden, he has no idea that he had ever threatened to do that explicitly. It was always just a hint. But, we heard from President Biden. He actually came out and expressed some very profound skepticism of those claims. And he made the same point that I'm making, which is, why was he threatening to use nuclear weapons all this time if now suddenly he's going to be dialing that down? But there were a lot of other things in this speech that were mystifying, but not new. Vladimir Putin has, for a long time, been trying to equate his war with Ukraine with a broader culture war. So basically dancing on the edge between culture war, as we use it in the West to mean something figurative, and actual war, an actual invasion that has killed tens of thousands of people, including tens of thousands, probably, of Russian soldiers. So he essentially said that this war targeting Ukraine is also against the entire West, and not just really the West, but mostly against Western elites. He described, dozens of genders. He talked about cancel culture. He talked about gay parades. These are things that he wants the Russian public, and this was a not so veiled sop to Western conservatives, to say that he is on their side. All of this coming right ahead of the U.S. midterm election. So it looks as though it was a not so hidden message to conservatives in the West saying, I am on your side. I am against this cancel culture, leftist identity politics mentality that we hear about so often in the United States and throughout Western Europe. Guys.
So many inflammatory statements in that speech, and Matt, but let's turn to what's happening on the ground there, specifically in the southern Kherson region, where both sides have been talking about the fighting for a while. What's the latest there?
Well, the latest is really just an ominous silence. I've been speaking to people who are in Kherson, and this city has essentially emptied out, and that's because Russian officials have already left. Some of the Ukrainian collaborators with the Russians have left as well. And the Russians have been beseeching the civilians left in Kherson to please leave, to go to the Russian side of the river, or sort of the side of the river that is closest to Russia. The entire city, of course, is still in Russian control. But the people that I've spoken to said that now there's kind of an eerie silence, an ominous sort of silence that has descended on the city. The streets are mostly empty as people have more or less totally evacuated. And we just heard now that evacuation effort is entirely complete. But we heard from the government here that it looked as though that the Russians were essentially leaving Kherson. But now it looks as though they're ready to fortify it and ready for a blistering battle there that many there worry may not even leave the city standing.
Hey, Matt, quickly, one of the concerns in this sort of new phase of war has been the targeting of these infrastructure targets, energy facilities, water, things like that. What can you tell us about the latest there, the ongoing power situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a bright and beautiful day here in Kyiv, so you can't really tell, but there are rolling blackouts throughout this city. And at night, you can see it much more clearly, where whole sections of the city are essentially darkened. We're in a hotel now that has its own generator. A lot of Ukrainians have rushed out to buy fuel generators that they are using to basically light their own homes. President Zelensky said that some 30% of the electrical capacity in this country has been damaged, and energy officials are rushing to try to repair it. But once it's repaired, it's unclear how long that will last. The Russians can simply target it again. Civilian infrastructure, guys.
All right, Matt Bradley in Kyiv for us. Stay safe and thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.